All right. I just want to make everyone aware because we are watching this, but we are also watching, obviously, the other huge story today, which is what happens next from the White House with regard to Iran. So we're going to we'll keep an eye on this situation in Dedham. But I want to go back to the Iran situation because President Trump has just made news in the Oval Office. He has made comments, and we are awaiting that sound. We're going to play it for you as soon as it turns around. And I want to bring in retired four-star General Jack Keane, Fox News senior strategic analyst, former vice chief of staff of the Army, and chairman of the Institute for the Study of War. So, General, as I mentioned, as soon as we get these comments from the president, we will turn those around. But your thoughts on where we stand right now as we wait for President Trump to make this decision about a potential strike on Fordo in Iran, the nuclear facility?
Yeah, I mean, the decision really surrounds the fact that if Fordow stands and it's not destroyed by the Israelis or its capacity much taken down, then the simple fact is Iran still has the capability to build a nuclear weapon. Mm-hmm. So that is really the issue here. And I, for the audience to understand, Iran built this very huge, complex nuclear enterprise with redundancy and resiliency at 12 different sites. So no one site by itself would eliminate the program. And the program overall is fundamentally designed from the outset to survive an attack on the program. What the Israelis are doing right now, they built into the program that kind of ability to absorb the attack, to survive that attack, to recover and to rebuild. And it's why the Ayatollah, Martha, in the negotiations with the Trump administration, why his negotiating team would never come to the table and say we will voluntarily dismantle. Yeah. Why is that? Because then he gives up the program with verification. He always believed that he can recover and rebuild despite the Israeli attack. And then there's this one site that he has. He knows that the Israelis likely cannot take it down, and he hopes that this will survive. That's kind of where we are. And the United States is pursuing it for the obvious reason that the president is committed to it, but also it sends a strong signal to our allies that this is our closest ally in the region. They need help. We're going to help them.
Yeah.
And what does it send a message to our adversaries? Much the same.
Absolutely.
It helps to build deterrence with them.
Ask you about, and I want to ask you about the message to China and Russia because I think it's so important in this story at this point. But first of all, just going back, I mean, give us your sense of confidence that this bunker buster bomb would be successful in disabling Fordo.
Yeah, this is a challenging target, and certainly the people involved in this know this in spades. We've been looking at Fordow, for years. The bunker buster, as you're describing it, was fundamentally designed to go deep, but in a building-like structure with cement that's being reinforced. We're going deep into a mountain structure, and it has considerable amount of rock in it. And because it's rock and not a cement structure, I'm not an engineer, but engineers have advised me on it. What happens is it dissipates some of the blast effect because it's rock, and it's not solid in the way that a cement structure would, and would focus the blast much more and be considerably more destructive. So it's not without its challenges in dealing with this, and that doesn't mean there couldn't be multiple bombs put on this target to bring it to that level of construction. If you really wanted a guarantee to destroy it, I mean, you could conduct a raid on it and then physically, secure the site and dismantle and blow the thing up. I mean, the Israelis certainly may have a plan to do just that if the United States is not going to help them. Obviously, there's considerably more risk with troops on the ground, insert them, be able to get them out. How much time does it take to do the damage? A lot more risk involved in an operation associated with that. The Israelis also may have already, and if they haven't, and when it comes to Fordow, they can't go deep and blow it up, but they should be able to take out the power grid that supports it and the ventilation system that supports it. They did damage like that to Natanz back in 2020 as one of their covert operations. They don't talk about it, but it's been out in the public since. So there are options that the Israelis have, but none of those options are as good as the option that we have.
Yeah.
And certainly, I think that's the most favored option.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that assessment. I don't know if we have the soundbite of President Trump, control room, talking about Putin. But let me know if we have this. But I want to ask the general, when you look at the posture right now of Russia and China as they watch this. All right, we now have the sound from President Trump. Stand by, General, if you would. Thank you very much. Let's listen in.
So, do you have any questions, please?
Do you know the latest on the evacuations out of Israel, Mr. President? Have you been updated on that?
No, we're having a meeting in an hour. We have a meeting downstairs in 1 hour. Yeah.
Mr. President, on Iran, if regime change does happen there, if the regime falls, do you have a plan for what you think would happen
I
there?
have a plan for everything, but we'll see what happens. We've got a ways to go. They should have made the deal. I had a great deal for them. They should have made that deal. 60 days we talked about it, and in the end they decided not to do it, and now they wish they did it. And they want to meet, but it's a little late to meet, but they want to meet. And they want to come to the White House. They'll even come to the White House. So we'll see. I may do that, but it's a shame it could have been done the easy way.
Do you think the regime there could fall?
Sure, anything could happen, right? Of that, sure, that could happen.
All right, we hear President Trump saying they're going to meet again downstairs in an hour. I assume that means likely in the Situation Room as they continue this. He was asked about regime change, which obviously is a huge issue here. It's not something that, there are other things that have to happen, obviously, before that, General. And what about this suggestion that the Iranians keep shooting down, but President Trump keeps confirming that they have reached out and said that they do want to meet?
Well, of course the Iranians want to meet. Mm-hmm. I mean, they want to do anything they can to put off what the whole world is looking at, Martha. And let's face facts. The Iranians will come to that meeting, I am absolutely convinced, with the same mindset I just described. And that is, they believe they have the capacity to absorb an attack, survive it, recover, and rebuild. And they are not going to voluntarily dismantle the program, which would mean the end of it, unless they have a secret site that we're not aware of that has enriched uranium centrifuges and they can still build the bomb. That is the one unknown, but we don't have any evidence of that as of now. So I don't think the administration will fall for the line that let's stop everything and go to negotiations, given what a dismal failure these negotiations have been for weeks as the Iranians maintain the hard line. We're not going to voluntarily dismantle. Not only that, we want to continue to have enrichment capability. And I don't see them changing that. And if they're coming to negotiation, it's just a ploy to put off the inevitable.
I mean, there's not much they have left in their arsenal. I mean, this promise to their regime that they are building this nuclear weapon is the main thing that they hang on to in terms of power. So it makes perfect sense that it would be something that they can't let go of, because I'm not sure what they have left. They have no economy. They've used all the money that they have to support these various proxy groups who have also been decimated by Israel. Speak to the isolation at this point as you assess it at the study of war for Khamenei right now.
Well, you put your finger right on it, Martha. The basic reason to have the nuclear weapon is to preserve the regime. That's reason one. The second reason is obviously the destruction of Israel, and also is use it, as political leverage in the region to achieve dominance even more than what they have with their proxies over the Arab states and the rest of it. And obviously the Arab states would have to enter into a nuclear arms race, and makes this whole area so much more volatile, because then you have a potential for an exchange of nuclear weapons, something we've never ever had. So yes, primary reason is preservation of the regime, and that is why they're holding on to this thing as long as they can. But look at let's assume that nuclear goes away, and they'll still want to rebuild at some point and recover, certainly. But they're also going to be very weakened politically internally as a result of this. You know, the people have been fed up with this regime for a long time, but now even some of the people that are close to the regime, Martha, I mean, in the first 12 hours, they lost all of their air defense capability. That means fighter jets for the last 5 days have been flying day and night over Iran. And the psychological and emotional impact of something like that is stunning. And the second thing is they lose their nuclear program, they lose the leaders of the program, they lose the leaders of their military, and finally, they lose the one offensive power that they really do have, and it's coming to an end. And that is their ballistic missile program. So they sit there, weak politically, weak economically, and weak militarily as a result of what has taken place. And are they vulnerable from internal regime change as a result of that? You betcha. In a way that they have never been in 45 years.
It's an absolutely stunning situation that you don't see these proxies coming to their defense, that you don't see Russia coming to their defense. You basically hear it's as quiet as a mouse all around the region, as I think most players feel like they wouldn't be unhappy at all to see this regime fall. General, they talk about a surprise weapon. They keep saying in Iran, you know, oh, wait till you see what we have coming down the pipeline in a couple of days. What's your reaction to that before we go, sir?
I have no idea what they're talking about, but just and I'm not the least bit intimidated by it, and I don't think the Israelis are, and certainly the United States government. But the point that you just made is crucial. They created Hezbollah as a military force and a terrorist organization. They armed it to the teeth. They provided 150,000 rockets and missiles. The principal reason, job one for Hezbollah, was to defend Iran from Israel in the event of a war. Hezbollah has not fired a single shot, but they have thousands of weapons still. Why aren't they doing that? They decapitated their leadership. Israel has broken their will right in front of us. No response whatsoever. That is absolutely amazing achievement that what we have seen.
It is. It's extraordinary. And think about this as such a moment of consequence in history that we have been on the brink of. And now it is such an opportunity that exists that I think is felt all around the region. And General, thank you so much. I'm so glad that you're with us today. We look forward to speaking with you in the days to come as history continues to unfold here. Thank you so much, General.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here, and great job with the breaking news.
Thank you all. Thanks, General. Thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.